exactly why it isn't targeting, yet he keeps right on calling anyway. Now, for what it's worth, Javon Bullard in this Athens Banner Herald story about his new NIL deal says, I thought it was a blessing to have a cookie dough named after myself and the team we played. It's pretty funny, and I feel like it's going to be good for advertising. Good for you, Javon Bullard. You keep cashing on those NIL deals, and we will keep around here celebrating the fact that Georgia beat Ohio State in the Peach Bowl, and if Ohio State's good enough to qualify to even be in this year's college football playoff, we believe Georgia's going to beat them again. All right, so with that said, let's shift gears and talk about something completely different here for a moment. So a very interesting tweet here over the weekend from an NFL reporter about what has apparently been a very busy time as of late for former Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett now. Let me show you this on Twitter here from Tom Pelissero, who still for now has a blue check. We'll see if that disappears here soon. But nonetheless, Pelissero writing, one of the busiest NFL draft prospects since the Combine is Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett, whose schedule so far includes private visits and or workouts with 10 teams per sources. He says Bennett won consecutive national titles with the Bulldogs and was a Heisman finalist last season. So I think it's important to note here that there is a pre-draft conversation that this is not just true for Stetson Bennett, it's true for a lot of players where it's like, oh, NFL teams are thinking this or NFL teams are thinking that. And we have this like mirage of so-and-so's rising up the draft boards or falling down the draft boards. And oftentimes this is just our own imagination about stuff like this, that there really isn't this evolving conversation necessarily. There are attempts to guess what NFL personnel men are going to do, but ultimately that decision only comes once, and it comes in April. And certainly there are plenty of people who've kind of made a cottage industry trying to tell you that there's something wrong or deficient about Stetson Bennett and somehow that he's not an acceptable NFL draft prospect. These people have been proven wrong over and over and over again. No matter how many times they double down on their wrongness, obviously ahead of the NFL draft, it certainly seems like Stetson Bennett is a legitimate NFL draft prospect. And frankly, when it's all said and done, Bennett has a chance to be about as highly rated as, or highly drafted as the Georgia quarterback has been in, frankly, quite some time. And, I think it has a potential as this kind of unfolds and takes place. I think there's a little bit of a potential here to kind of recast a little bit about how Georgia is viewed as a program when it comes to the quarterback position. And obviously of these 10 NFL teams that Bennett's supposedly meeting with, if one of those, teams were to take Bennett, fourth round, maybe I guess third round's a remote possibility, but let's say more likely like a fourth round situation or something like that. Well, then at that point in time, I think it has a chance to kind of, as I said, recast Georgia as a program for quarterbacks moving forward here a little bit. As far as what these teams, though, are seeing when they look at Bennett, Kirby Smart, going back to Pro Day the other day, was kind of asked about that. Hey, where do you want to see improvement for Bennett? The evaluation of Bennett now as an NFL draft prospect. This is what Kirby said about that at the time.
Well, decision-making's been really good. He's shown improvement in those, but I don't think you pick one area and say, hey, he can improve in this area. He can improve in everything. What he has done is played at the highest level of college football for a lot of games, and he's played really well. And I think that speaks volumes for itself.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's what it kind of comes down to is, listen, if I'm an NFL GM, it's all about the story you want to tell yourself, because obviously no one knows any of these guys are going to, perform once they get to the NFL level. It is a guessing game, even for the most expert minds, expert voices in this entire sport. There is still a certain guessing game around this, but it's about what story do you want to tell. And to me, it's a lot safer story to tell of, hey, I bet on a guy who played well during games as a way of sort of trusting that guy with my franchise. Not as one of your 32 starters necessarily, but a guy that's on an NFL roster. Certainly it seems like Stetson Bennett's on his way to doing that. Now, off the top of the show, I sort of said that some of the stuff that had been kind of done over the years comparing Georgia to Alabama, some of that was probably a little overwrought. Some of that was probably a little too try-hard in some respects, trying to find a fit in a match there that didn't necessarily exist. But there is one element in this story that does kind of remind me about something from Alabama's past. In a lot of ways, doesn't it sort of seem like that Stetson Bennett could prove to be Georgia's version of what A.J. McCarron once was at Alabama, a guy who, as a multi-year starter on back-to-back national championship teams, certainly gave, at that time, the Crimson Tide a big performance on the field, and then set up a scenario where the Alabama quarterback position was kind of recast for many years in the future because of what McCarron sort of got started. And then, after McCarron, shortly after that, we're talking about Jalen Hurts. We're talking about, Tua Tagovailoa. We're talking about, Bryce Young and Mac Jones in between that. We're talking about a very different level of quarterback prospect. And the guy who kind of punched in the ceiling and all of that and kind of reimagined what the quarterback position could be at that program, in some respects, was A.J. McCarron. And to me, this could really be the final chapter of Stetson Bennett's legacy at Georgia. I don't think anyone would have necessarily guessed or predicted that Bennett was going to be the guy to bring Georgia the success that he brought the program. But on the heels of him doing what he did, I think he shows a proof of concept for what other quarterbacks could do. And the next one in line and all that may be one of the guys that's currently on the roster. Maybe it's Carson Beck, and then maybe after that it's Brock Vandegrift or Gunnar Stockton, or maybe the chatter that continues around Dylan Raiola about kind of the next generation of all this, a recruit, or maybe it's Ryan Puglisi coming down from Connecticut, whatever else. But following the Bennett story throughout the rest of this pre-draft process could be interesting. It certainly seems like that Bennett is being treated as a legitimate future NFL quarterback by the men who are going to ultimately make this decision, and Bennett getting that kind of treatment sort of sets up a future where, hey, other Georgia quarterbacks may even be higher rated as prospects. Other Georgia quarterbacks may even break new ground in terms of where they're drafted. In the first round again, maybe eventually even there as well. When we all look back on that, we'll say, hey, a lot of that got started by Stetson Bennett, who had bigger numbers and more success than we were used to seeing Georgia quarterbacks have, and kind of creating a level of possibility that existed for the guys that come after him. That could be a fun part of Stetson Bennett's legacy, and it could be playing out here this April. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and we are glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 9:45, 1st and 15. That's at DawgNation.com, DawgNation app. So if you normally watch on a different video platform and you want to tune in to see us on the platform, kind of right there on our own website or right there on our own app, you can actually join us early. Special content for only those who join us via DawgNation.com or the DawgNation app. That's every morning at 9:45. In fact, I don't even think that's archived anywhere. Once we do that, it's over. It just sort of disappears. It's like our own version of Snapchat, except it's not on Snapchat. But the point is, as we do that every morning at 9:45. Then after that, it's an all skate. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch there at 10 a.m. Of course, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast, wherever you find them, on the Apple Player, the Google Player, Spotify, worldfamousDawgNation.com. We try to make this podcast available just about anywhere we can so you can be a part of what we're doing here, and we really appreciate that. And, of course, our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia, they make that all possible there as well. Of course, when it comes to energy-efficient windows and doors, that's the reason to know what Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about. They make your house look better on the outside, feel better on the inside. Last night, we had some storms run our house. Many of you did there as well. By the way, prayers for those, certainly in the state of Mississippi, who've dealt with a very serious version of this. Obviously, what we had at our home last night, nowhere near that serious. But it was, loud enough that my son kind of woke up and came downstairs. And so we're trying to, just kind of watching the rain for a minute, looking out the window. And I'm thinking, boy, I sure am glad, for a home that kind of keeps all this rain and wind and stuff outside the house here. You don't want that getting in. But if you've got improperly fitted windows, or if you've got just sort of inefficient, old windows, it's probably time for an upgrade if you've got that rain kind of coming through the crevices and things like that, getting underneath the bottom of your door. Sometimes you have that kind of thing going on there. You want the outside to stay where it's supposed to be, the inside to be nice and comfortable the way it's supposed to be there as well. And that's what Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about. So go ahead and have one of those pressure consultations with one of those Pella experts. Let them walk you through the product line, the installation options, the financing options. They can even talk to you about special savings there as well, because between now and May 22nd, you can get 10% off your entire project or 0% APR for 24 months. So go see them in their Experience Center in Duluth, or find them online at pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 678-638-1429. That's 678-638-1429. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. All right, so let's check in now before we talk to John Stinchcomb. Speaking of offensive line, the position that John Stinchcomb played, Georgia got some good news on that front yesterday, adding a commitment to the class of 2024. His name is Malachi Toliver. He is 6'6", 310 pounds. I think we have something that we can show off for Mr. Toliver on the screen here, because, yeah, there you go. Good-looking edit there. 6'3", 300 pounds. Nice-looking DawgNation edit on that to celebrate all of that. Toliver, who hails from up in the northwest part of the state, says that Coach Searles loves those Northwest Georgia guys. That's where he played growing up in his day. That's how he believes he's going to win football games. I definitely feel like being up here is different from being anywhere else in Georgia. It's definitely different football up here, and I feel like that's got an effect on me. So listen, we like guys who love this state, who feel some pride in all of this with the states. That gives you something to like there. He also says, This is from the story DawgNation.com yesterday. I try to be that guy in the field that's going to do anything to win the game. Give all the effort. I feel like I believe in something that Coach Searles was talking to me about yesterday. He said he doesn't look at rankings. He just watches the film. He doesn't care if you're a 3-star, a 2-star, or a 5-star. He wants guys that he believes that are fitted for Georgia football. He believes in me, and he told me yesterday that he feels like that. He feels that I can help them win championships. I'm going to be a great football player, especially when I'm here and then after I leave. So what Toliver's kind of referencing there, once again, that's from the story DawgNation.com. You can read more about Malachi there at DawgNation.com. What Toliver's referencing there is compared to a lot of the recruits that Georgia brings in, he's not nearly as highly ranked. I think he's outside the top 900 nationally when it comes to a recruiting process here. And there is a certain extent to which, as offensive line coach, Stacey Searles has kind of trusted his own evaluations. Whereas, in the Sam Pittman days and maybe early Matt Luke, it seemed like all Georgia was bringing in were kind of those elite, highly rated recruits. In the Stacey Searles era, in some cases, Searles has chosen to make a little bit different type of player evaluation. But the proof is in the pudding here for Coach Searles right now. Georgia's offensive line this past season played, I believe, the best football of anybody in the country. I think they should have won the Joe Moore Award. So if any coach, based on the performance on the field, has earned the right to make his own evaluation, I think Coach Searles is certainly an example of that. It's also fair to point out here that, in some respects, guys that are working their way towards playing time in Georgia, oftentimes the guys who are doing that end up being some of the types of players like Toliver says he is, a guy that's willing to come in here and work hard and kind of outperform what his recruiting ranking was. Isn't that kind of what we're being told Austin Blaskey might be doing right now? So certainly a program like Georgia, where obviously you don't get to be a national champion, certainly a back-to-back national champion, if you aren't bringing in a bunch of elite recruits. And in some respects, Georgia's got young, elite offensive linemen waiting in the wings there too. Ernest Green may eventually be a starter this season. A guy like Monroe Freeling is certainly competing for playing time. Those were the kind of elite recruits that you expect Georgia to be coming after. But when Georgia's also chosen to make its own evaluation, trust its own evaluation, and bring a player in, oftentimes a lot of those players prove to be diamonds in the rough, and maybe that's exactly what Toliver's going to be there as well. So we'll congratulate him for showing up at UGA, working out for coaches, kind of participating in a little bit of an on-campus visit, getting the green light to go out there and make a public commitment to the Dogs, and obviously Toliver does that. So pretty clearly he impressed who he needed to impress to put himself in the presence of this 2024 class here right now. So good news for him today, and good news for Georgia as it adds an offensive lineman to its 2024 class. Pretty interesting stuff across the board on that. Now, speaking of the offensive line, a guy who knows so much more about this kind of stuff than I do is our buddy John Stinchcomb. He's a former UGA All-American. Obviously, he works out and trains a lot of the offensive linemen right now who are hoping to be in the NFL draft. That's something that John's been doing for a good number of years there as well. Just a great guy doing great stuff. And so we'll get ready to bring John Stinchcomb onto the program today. Now, before we are done, also, we're going to have some fun with this. Over the course of the weekend, there were a good number of Georgia fans who involved me in a pretty big celebration for something that really had very little to do with football. What was that? We will tell you about that here coming up. But before that, latest in spring practice, Georgia adds an offensive line commit. And just exactly what kind of prospect could Stetson Bennett be for the NFL? And what would it mean for Georgia if he did kind of break a little bit of a ceiling for this program in terms of that next level? Talk to John Stinchcomb about all that right now. We call this a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Great to have him and all of you with us here today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So John Stinchcomb is here. It's a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. And before we kind of get into our conversation here today, I haven't really had a chance to talk to our audience yet. Last week was a little bit of a weird week for us. I haven't really had a chance to talk to our audience yet about a great time that John and I had. We told you we're going to do this like VIP insider lunch type thing where some folks are going to come have a great lunch at Marlowe's. And we're going to talk some football and just kind of hang out and have a good time. We actually did this last week. I guess was it exactly a week ago? No, it's Tuesday. Last Tuesday is when we did this. John, this was so much fun. What a great time this was. A great group of Georgia fans on hand for that. Really people that kind of traveled in from, Augusta and Columbus and, places like that. We had a lot of folks from kind of outside the Atlanta area who were some of our winners here, drove over to be a part of this. I thought it was a great time and a great collection of Georgia fans for it. I appreciated your participation, and it was great to be able to break a little bread with you.
I enjoyed it. It was a great meal. Obviously, Marlowe's does a great job of feeding you, but what was so fun is being with the fans and actually talking some Georgia football and hearing what was on their mind, and I can only hope that they had as good of a time as we did.
Yeah, no doubt about that. That is indeed the case, and obviously plenty of football for us to talk about here today. Georgia did get an offensive line commit yesterday. It's Malachi Toliver. And, John, this is one of those things where we just read a quote from Toliver a moment ago. He is not a highly rated recruit necessarily. Georgia obviously mostly pursues elite recruits from a ranking standpoint. That's not really what Toliver is, but Toliver earned the right to go public with his commitment. Stacey Searles, because of the way the Georgia offensive line played last year, has seemingly earned the right to make whatever talent evaluation choice he wants to make. Pretty clearly the proof is in the pudding here right now. So what do you make, I guess, the fact that Georgia kind of goes outside its type here in terms of 4- and 5-star type prospects to bring in a guy that impressed Coach Searles and impressed, this Georgia staff in kind of an in-person situation here, and saying, hey, we're going to put guys out there that want to fight and want to play football, and if we think they're right for us, then we're not going to pay too much attention to whatever the recruiting rankings might be. If anybody's earned the right to do that, it would seem like it's Georgia on the heels of back-to-back national championships, right?
No, absolutely, and I hope fans realize that coaching staffs across the country aren't waiting for rivals and 24/7 to come out with their rankings of players to figure out who they're going to recruit. I mean, they spend a heck of a lot of time in the back rooms and with a number of staff identifying the players that fit what they're looking for, and it often corresponds with the evaluations made by some of these national recruiting sites, and sometimes it doesn't. I think you can look back at Ladd McConkey and Stetson as guys that weren't high on many radars, and Georgia was able to go out and get Ladd. But even offensive line-wise, a guy like Solomon Kinley, who didn't come in with 5 stars like the rest of his class and was a big contributor and went on to play in the NFL. So I think Georgia has figured out a way to identify guys that they want to seek out and can help the program, and I have complete faith that they're doing so, and Malachi Toliver is another guy that fits in what they're looking to do. I've watched some of his film, and you can see pretty quickly that he's got some amazing flexibility for a man his size and good technique, and you see some of the ingredients for what you're looking for in a player that can make that step to this next level.
So let me ask you this, John, because I do high school football games each and every week, and Toliver goes to a great Cartersville program. That's really one of the winningest programs in the entire state, certainly in the last couple decades at least. He's 6'3", 300 pounds, I think. But there are plenty of guys who kind of come close to matching those measurables, and they don't get time of day from Georgia or any other SEC program there as well. Like, just being big alone is not enough, and frankly, Georgia recruits a lot of offensive linemen who even, far bigger than 300 pounds at 6'3" for Malachi Toliver. So what is that thing that, and you're a guy that trains offensive linemen, you obviously, yourself were a pretty a very highly rated prospect coming out of high school and went on an NFL career there as well. What's the thing that makes a 300-pounder an SEC-level offensive line prospect? In other words, you walk onto a football field, what would be that thing that says, oh, this guy is in a different category of other guys his size? Is there a quick thing that would differentiate that? Like, what would be the easiest way to explain what would cause a guy like this to stand out from everybody else?
Yeah, I think it's athleticism. I think you're looking for not only are you a big body or a frame that can hold weight, but also can you move? There's plenty of folks that you watch on Friday nights that they're big, but they don't have the athleticism to move that big old frame around. And what jumps out at you, and we've done this in the past when we just kind of evaluate guys that have signed with Georgia, is when you watch their film, how agile they are and their ability to play in space. And I think the second piece of that is the dog that they have in them. Do they have that aggressive nature where they're finishing folks? And, not every Friday night are you going up against somebody that's going to be playing in the SEC or get drafted or signed to a team, a big program, Power 5 program. So, how do they take on those matchups as well? I think you're looking for dominance at time and that mentality that, you're enforcing your will against the opponent. And I think those are the two things, in addition to just, hey, he's big, that really separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will, as it comes to big bodies that are playing in high school football.
So you were considered to be a very athletic offensive lineman. We were talking the other day at Marlowe's at lunch, but the fact that you had a very impressive NFL scouting performance. In fact, a scouting combine performance. In fact, our buddy Mike Griffith wrote about this when he was kind of comparing the current Georgia players to previous Georgia performance in the combine, that you had done very well at the NFL scouting combine. So when it comes to improving your own athleticism and offensive lineman, what would you say was the most important thing for you? Was it attention to detail during drill work? Was it making sure, hey, I'm a big guy, but I can't get too big? Like, in other words, kind of paying attention to your weight and things like that. What was, I guess, the key factor for you in making sure you maintain the highest level of athleticism while also being big enough to kind of get in there in the trenches and do the hand-to-hand combat that being an offensive lineman in the SEC requires?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two contrasting stories, and I think I've got the expertise to share in this because I'm talking about myself and my brother. But when Matt was a senior in high school, he was 320, and it was a high school 320. So he spent most of his freshman year peeling that weight off and putting on muscle instead of just weight, as many high schoolers do. They like, to play big time football, I've got to be big, and so they just add weight.
Yeah.
And you get to school and you realize, man, I've got to make sure it's the right kind of weight. And for me, it was a little bit different, where I probably had the athleticism, but I didn't have as much weight. So I spent a lot of my time, especially my redshirt years, I was learning from behind Matt and Chris Terry and Jonas that you had to have the muscle. You can't just be able to move and have technique, but you also need the mass to stop some of those guys and nightmares that you're going to come across on a Saturday afternoon. So, again, there's not one recipe that works for everybody. It's universal. For me, I needed to add weight and get heavier and not sacrifice athleticism. And there's some players that have the weight but probably need to make sure it's the right kind so that it's not at the detriment of their athleticism. So a couple different routes there. Doesn't always have to be the same one, but you're still looking for that combo, which is it's hard to find. A good balance of you've got the weight, you've got the mass, but you're also able to move around with it.
I was talking before you joined us, but the fact that it seems like Stetson Bennett right now is getting a decent level of attention from these NFL draft scouts. It seems like that Stetson has a chance to be, about as highly rated as, Georgia, highly drafted, I should say, as a Georgia quarterback has been in quite some time. And John, I would certainly root for Stetson Bennett to have that become true. Obviously, kind of putting a punctuation mark on what has been an incredibly successful Georgia career. But I think there's also a degree to which this could really unlock a level of achievement for Georgia moving forward where, hey, Georgia has a very good chance of having a great starting quarterback here this year, whether it's Carson Beck or one of the younger guys vying to compete with him. There's a chance that Georgia may get a 5-star quarterback this year, and Dylan Raiola to go along with, Ryan Puglisi, who's already committed, who a lot of folks really like there as well. That Bennett's success, both in terms of better stats than Georgia quarterbacks have had in quite some time, maybe a pretty high draft pick here, mid-round as a possibility, I would say, that all of a sudden you kind of recast how you think about the Georgia program and the quarterback position, and maybe Georgia kind of goes on one of these runs kind of like Alabama's gone on, where a guy like A.J. McCarron gets it started, but then after that you're talking about the Jalen Hurts, the Tua Tagovailoas, and the Mac Jones and the Bryce Youngs, where eventually quarterback position looks like every other position in terms of the kind of success that it produces. It seems like Bennett really has the chance to be the catalyst that starts a lot of that for a UGA, and John, the best I can tell is the NFL draft could really accentuate that.
Yeah, I think there's two topics here. One is Stetson and his evaluation, or the NFL's evaluation of him, and will he get the shot that I think he's earned, and to be in that discussion of viable starting potentially quarterbacks in the NFL. What he was able to do in the college ranks was in spite of his recruitment and his perception by college teams. I think even Georgia would be the first to acknowledge they didn't identify him as having the chops to play the way that he did, and he had to exceed that. Now, the NFL's got a chance to reassess right, based on a new body of work. And what Stetson's put out there for the past 2 years has been nothing short of exceptional. You led your team to 2 back-to-back national championships. At times, the team was relying heavily on him to create and make plays and opportunities for the offense to get back in the game, specifically in the Peach Bowl comes to mind, and he did so and passed those tests with flying colors. So for him, I think it's a chance to reset those expectations, and I think that will be reflected in where he's drafted at the end of April. For Georgia, the number one recruiter for all players is winning, and I think you look at that first, but you also look at how you're possibly going to be used when you go to the school that you're evaluating and assessing as to whether or not it's a good fit for you. And I do think that Stetson has raised the bar there, that the expectations from when he got there to when he left of what a quarterback can provide for the offense has been accelerated. And you say, okay, well, this is certainly a potential landing spot for a higher level, higher caliber player coming out of high school. I'd also say, I think this is the point that you're trying to drive at. It doesn't hurt when your predecessor is getting drafted, and you can see that he was developed during his time at Georgia. He's not the same player when he got there as when he left, and I think all players are looking for that opportunity. I want to be able to get better. I want to take my skills from where they're at to playing at a much higher level, and be able to do so on the field and show that I've got the chops for professional play, which I guess is the driving force for most athletes these days coming out of high school. Is they're looking for a platform to springboard them into a professional career. And the more guys in your position that you can look back and say, wow, they've got a pretty strong track record, the better. And Stetson can certainly kick that off, or at least restart it in a very special way. I
want to ask you about Georgia spring practice here in a moment. Prior to that, let me remind you, this is our Dog Nation insider here, John Stinchcomb, joining us as part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. And, of course, you can't be a Dog Nation insider the way that John Stinchcomb is probably, but you can be a Marlowe's Tavern insider. In fact, we all can. You can be one there as well, and it's really simple to join. You go to marlowestavern.com and find out about this. It's also free to join there as well to become a member of the Marlowe's Tavern Insider Club. Now, just for doing so, as a special incentive, you're going to get $10 off your $30 purchase right there at Marlowe's Tavern. Then after that, you're in the Insider Club, and you go to Marlowe's and earn what are called qualified visits. Now, a qualified visit is anytime you spend $15 on food or beverage there at Marlowe's, that counts as a qualified visit. Now, once you get 4 of these qualified visits, you're going to receive a complimentary entree reward up to $20 on your next visit there to Marlowe's Tavern, including the one right there in your neighborhood there as well. It's free to join, as I said, and a great way to enjoy the chef-inspired food and the craft cocktails, all the things that make the Marlowe's Tavern famous. So enjoy this today. Go to marlowestavern.com to find out more about that. That is marlowestavern.com to find out more about that. All right, John, let me kind of finish with this sort of broadly on spring practice, where it seems like you're kind of hearing a couple different things right now. The Georgia offense kind of getting acclimated to change. Mike Bobo's kind of instilling a new system, or I shouldn't say it's completely new, but there's obviously a new voice leading the Georgia offense at the very least. Clearly a new starting quarterback. It sounds like that competition has been kind of fun to watch here thus far. You're kind of getting used to life without guys like Darnell Washington. So on the one hand, you've got some change on offense. And on the other side, on defense, you've got the emergence of some playmakers, where it sounds like there's an interesting competition going on at cornerback opposite Kamari Laster, that eventually the Georgia outside linebacker is going to show themselves to be a little bit different kind of category of player than maybe they were a year ago. Some new faces kind of populating the defensive line here too, obviously, with guys like Jalen Carter not being here anymore. So I guess I'm kind of curious, which side of the ball is more interesting to you? The emerging playmakers there on defense or the adjustment to change on offense? Which side of the ball do you find to be more interesting for Georgia right now this spring?
Don't make me pick. I'm excited about both. Obviously that quarterback battle is a big one. And I think what's really, I think, a blessing for Georgia is that there is no opportunity for complacency. There's no on either side of the ball, it's not like, oh man, this is just a practice that is mandated but not necessary. And right now, you've got a new offensive coordinator. You're replacing pieces. Competition is high. You're trying to impress Coach Bobo on the offensive side and replace pieces on defense and say, I want this opportunity that's available, and here's the reason why you should be thinking about me in this place. That's a good thing. It's not always the case when you return as many guys as Georgia does. But because of the competition, because of the standard that's been set, and because of the opportunities, I think this makes for a fun spring practice. And it's, by fun, I mean competitive.
Sure.
Guys are wanting to get out there and compete. So offensively, defensively, if I had to pick, I'm more interested to see how holes are filled on the defensive side of the ball. I want to see what happens at outside linebacker. I want to see what happens trying to replace a Keely Ringo on the back end, and what we look like at safety after Chris Smith. So D-line without Jalen Carter. There's a lot of pieces that we started to see towards the end of the year with like guys like Bear Alexander, and I mean there's some names that you think most likely are going to fill those roles, but what does that look like? If you press my feet to the fire and say which side would I have more intrigue on, I think it's the defense. I think I feel more comfortable with where the offense is at right now than and with some certainty of certain places, with the exception of quarterback, as to how that's probably going to look in the fall. And I think there's probably a little more haze as to what it's going to really look like on the defensive side of ball for Georgia.
John, great conversation. Love being able to do that with you each week here on a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. We appreciate your insight. Hope you have a great week, and look forward to getting a chance to talk to you again here soon. Hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later before we're sitting down at Marlowe's having another lunch together there as well.
I look forward to it, BA. I'll be with you later this week. It sounds like we might be hosting some folks on site on Thursday.
Yeah, so, looking forward to that. It's going to be a great time. Going to be a great time.
Good stuff, BA. Appreciate you. Go Dogs.
Thank you, John.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, good conversation there with John Stinchcomb, especially when it comes to the intrigue about spring practice. All this leading up to G-Day on April 15th. I thought that Georgia had an awesome release the other day, kind of a brand new G-Day logo. I don't have to show it to you, but it's really cool. Kind of like the old school sports pennant with a very kind of a classic font around that. I thought it was a great look. I hope they kind of keep this for G-Day moving forward. I would love that. There's some cool old like G-Day stuff from the past. Like I know that, just over the course of the years, like, G-Day programs, things like that, that sometimes that kind of creates, kind of a nice collectible type thing. So I think this would be kind of a fun thing to sort of make as the G-Day logo going forward. And of course, I guess a lot of you also kind of wondering about those G-Day tickets. To my knowledge, we have not had an announcement yet about when G-Day tickets might become available, whether they'll be free or will there be some sort of price for them. I guess they were $5 a year ago. And so I think it was around this time a year ago, almost exactly on this date when Georgia, I think, released its G-Day ticket information last year. So we may hear something about G-Day tickets this week and about how you might be able to get them. Keep in mind, a good bit of stadium construction there right now. So in some form or fashion, that's likely to have some impact on how your G-Day experience goes. If you'll remember for the national championship celebration, that entire side of the stadium is the south side. I always get the directions confused. But the south side of the stadium was kind of off limits because of the stadium construction. You'll remember they kind of configured the stage differently for this event this year than it was for the championship celebration in 2021 because of that. So my guess is it'll only be about a half-house type availability for G-Day. You'll have everybody sitting on that opposite side over there. But we should, if I had to guess, I bet we'll hear something about G-Day tickets this week. We may even hear about those in the next 24 hours. If we don't, I'll try to find out what's going on there on that. But my guess is we should hear something here coming up there pretty soon. Let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. It was fun for me over the weekend. When you get to be about a month out or something like that, you got to sort of officially register, kind of get signed in for your cruise. And so I spent some time on Saturday night kind of getting registered for the DawgNation cruise and, getting all that kind of squared away, just some of those final sort of kind of paperwork type details. And it just gets me excited because we are now inside of a month for the DawgNation cruise. And I know so many of you are going to be on board with us. We're excited about that there as well. And I wish we could take everybody, because I know we've had a lot of calls here lately about last-minute opportunities, things like that. I wish we could get everybody on the ship with us, Independence to Seas, that wants to be there. But the next best thing is taking the excitement that maybe you've had about us talking about this and taking your own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. Jessica Slater is a great travel agent. She can help you with all this. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. If you want to take a 4-night sailing like we're going to be doing on Independence of the Seas, you want a weekend 3-night sailing, you can do that there as well. You want to do like I did in February, take a 7-night sailing, you can do that too. Jessica Slater, a great travel agent, to help you with all of that. Royal Caribbean's got so many great options for you there as well, of things you can take advantage of and experiences you can enjoy. And I can tell you, this is a great time to be on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. So go ahead and get your travel booked up. Be ready to go on that. For those of you who are going to be with us this upcoming April, can't wait to see you on board. As we drive down to Port Canaveral, and at least I'm driving, drive down to Port Canaveral, get on board Independence of the Seas, go to Nassau in the Bahamas. Perfect day, Coco Cay. What a time that is going to be. Now, speaking of having a good time, Georgia fans were also having a good time this weekend there as well, but it was for things that had very little to do with football. It was about basketball. It was the Alabama Crimson Tide, the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA men's basketball tournament, and yet they have met an unceremonious conclusion to their basketball season, getting bounced out of the tourney by San Diego State. And a lot of you are reaching out to me to share in Alabama's misery. We take joy in that. I want to show you a couple of these here to give you an example of how Georgia fans are. Now, I'll admit this is not the prettiest, graphic design work here. I just sort of slapped these on the screen. But nonetheless, Tim Grubb writing in to say, some long drinks are going to be consumed tonight. Hashtag Alabama lost. Tim, you are so right about that. We definitely toasted that. James Lawson writes in to say, how about them Aztecs? Obviously a reference to San Diego State. Anthony White giving you some laughing emojis about Alabama going down. Keith Pitt saying that the Bama basketball program was in the wrong place, the wrong time. A reference to Nate Oates. Choice of words related to the Brandon Miller situation. So a lot of Georgia fans having a lot of fun with this. In fact, we're not done making fun of Alabama for its basketball loss. We'll do some more of that here coming up in just a moment. I don't mind telling you, obviously, we can never be sure of what someone's state of mind is, and this can only be speculation. But listen, I don't mind speculating with you. I think as happy as Georgia fans are about Alabama losing in basketball, I think Nick Saban's probably pretty happy too. I don't think Nick Saban wanted to see somebody else going to join him on that national championship perch at Alabama. So he'd never admit it. This is the kind of thing he might even recognize. You don't really recognize jealousy in the mirror very much. But I think he may have been a little jealous of Alabama's basketball success. That's why he said some of the things this month that he said. But now he has very little to worry about in that. And I guess now we sort of look ahead to a Final Four that, my gosh, I mean, we were sort of told coming into this by some of the people who follow college basketball the closest that this could be the wildest tournament we've seen. It could be more wide open, that the level of dominance of the top-ranked teams, maybe with the exception of Alabama, just wasn't as high as we've come to expect, and that almost anything could happen. Well, you sort of see that. And this is one of those things where when 1 or 2 of the 1 seeds go down, it kind of creates a little bit of a compound effect where all of a sudden after that, anything can happen because you have a series of random events taking place. Basketball games being played by relatively evenly matched teams. And so ultimately, you've kind of got this chaos Final Four here because of the fact that so many of the top teams went down. And there's going to be this attempt to say, well, why is this? What happened? What creates, this wide open, unpredictable Final Four? And, oftentimes, things are just sort of things that sometimes there isn't an easy explanation for that this could be just as simple as, well, once 1 or 2 of the 1 seeds lost, all of a sudden that created an opportunity for sort of more random things to take place because this year's dominant teams just were not as dominant as they've been in the past. And some people maybe want to try to sort of ascribe some sort of meaning to that. I'm not quite so sure there necessarily is. There might be, but it's not obvious that there is. All we know is that most brackets completely busted, and most people will be tuning in this upcoming weekend to watch a Final Four that is very, very different than they ever imagined it would have been. Back to the subject of football here for a moment. So there was a very interesting story at ESPN.com a couple of days ago involving Lane Kiffin and what appears to me to be spin control by Kiffin trying to explain away his flirtation with Auburn at the end of last season and the acknowledgement of something that I think was obviously true, which is by the end of last year, Ole Miss folks were not happy with Lane Kiffin at all. And, Kiffin is like the most willing source for everything that ESPN ever does, whether it be, an interview with himself, about himself, or an interview talking about somebody else. Lane Kiffin is just, sort of Mr. Media, especially at ESPN. And so I would say in exchange for his access, Kiffin gets pretty favorable coverage by ESPN. This has been true, for quite some time. And this is an example of this, ESPN essentially becoming a mouthpiece to kind of explain Lane Kiffin's reasoning for kind of how he handled the situation and the rumors connecting him to the Auburn job a year ago. So this is some of the quotes, and this is kind of interesting if you're a Georgia fan because you play Ole Miss this year. Ole Miss is coming into Athens later on this season. About Kiffin and his decision-making around this, the fact that he didn't put the fire out on the idea that he could go to Auburn. Kiffin says, we screw up all the time, but when you think you're doing the right thing and then you get really criticized for it, especially by your own people, I struggle with that because I feel like I went through a decision-making process that you're supposed to go through. I mean, you got to decide. It's your life and your family's life. He then goes on to say in this story about, basically people being mad at him for almost going to Auburn and not, letting that rumor die down. Says, I felt like it would have been a distraction to make this big statement 24 hours before the game and making it about me. So I thought I was doing the right thing by saying, okay, I'm going to avoid making this about me. You guys go play. But just so you know, you don't have to sit here and worry that your coach is leaving tomorrow after the game or something. I'm staying. I just haven't made it known publicly. I told them thinking that's what obviously matters the most because we lost. It wasn't done right. If we won, nobody would have cared. That's the thing, though, is that you can be, Mr. Cute social media guy and constantly be talking about other people's jobs, continually flirting with Tennessee on social media for reasons that are beyond bizarre to me, allowing this Auburn thing to kind of grow and fester without stamping it out. The idea that he didn't think it would be the right thing to bring that to an end. I just don't know anybody who buys that. This is a Lane Kiffin, by all appearances, that wanted to keep every option open and available to him. And as long as he's the hot name in coaching, that's all fine and good. When you go out and lose the Egg Bowl to an average as grits Mississippi State team, all of a sudden every choice that you make is going to be called into question. And I think the Ole Miss people were absolutely right in not being happy with him about that. For Kiffin to sort of use this Ole Miss job as some sort of springboard to, flirt with whatever job he wants and consider taking whatever job he wants and then decide the last minute, maybe I'll just stay at Ole Miss, for the convenience of it, whatever else. They seem to be willing to tolerate a pretty lackluster effort at recruiting, and, maybe he realizes a place like Auburn, that's not going to be acceptable. Whatever Kiffin's ultimate reasoning is, the Ole Miss fans, the Ole Miss boosters, maybe more importantly here too, the Ole Miss, administrators, key decision makers, they have a right to ask more from Kiffin than what they've gotten. And, I would say that when it comes to outlets like ESPN, I said a moment ago, Kiffin does get a pretty big free pass from national types like this because he is so accessible to them. Therefore, they treat him kindly. And they don't ask tough questions about him and some of the things in his past that I think probably should be examined a little bit more closely than they have been. So I think it's time for Lane Kiffin to demonstrate, do you want to be a serious person or not? Do you want to be a funny man on social media, or do you want to be a coach that actually builds a career about something other than a famous last name? Do you want to build your own legacy as a coach or not? And I think it's about time for him to demonstrate how serious he wants to take himself and how seriously he expects other people to take him. Because his actions at the end of last season, flirting with the Auburn job, creating some sort of, feud with somebody who, reported on that scenario, those are not the actions of a serious person. And so I think it'll be interesting to see moving forward just how serious Lane Kiffin does take himself and what he can do to kind of, I guess, put himself back in the good graces with the Ole Miss community, because I think they have a right to not be happy with him. One final SEC story to get to here for a moment. I saw where Eli Drinkwitz was on a radio show the other day. He was on that Greg McElroy and Cole Kubelik radio show in Birmingham, and he was talking about the Missouri quarterback competition. And you've had the situation where last year's starter Connor Cook's been injured. You've got Jay Garcia, who's transferred in, and you've got Sam Horn, the former Collins Hill quarterback, who's there, who also has not been a full participant in spring practice because of baseball injury. And a couple of things here, speaking of Ole Miss, kind of on this too, is that you see a couple of situations in the SEC where there is an incumbent starter in a competition, and I think it's probably safe to say that it's the wish of the program that the incumbent starter not win the starting job here this year. I think at Ole Miss that's true for Jackson Dart. I think they brought in Spencer Sanders to win that competition. And at Missouri, I think the same thing's true there as well, where Cook was the starter a year ago, but Missouri didn't really get effective quarterback play, and so therefore that's why a guy like Jay Garcia, formerly of Miami, is there at Missouri. I think that Missouri fans probably should be and are rooting for Garcia. I think that deep down, Eli Drinkwitz probably is doing that there as well. So in the case of Spencer Sanders at Ole Miss, we'll see if he can beat out Jackson Dart to give Ole Miss a better level of quarterback play than it had a year ago. And for Missouri, who still got Luther Burden, he didn't leave. He, I guess, took some NIL money and stayed there in Columbia. Can they find a quarterback more capable of getting him the football than Cook proved to be a year ago? And in the case of Horn, I think that Horn's a great athlete, but he has not been able to be a full participant in spring practice because of a baseball injury. And to hear Eli Drinkwitz this spring have to talk about Horn and the fact that his injury took place away from football, playing a different sport. And at one point in time, it seemed like Drinkwitz wasn't even fully aware of all the details on that. It's hard to imagine Kirby Smart, the Georgia coach, ever having that conversation. Hard to imagine Kirby Smart ever, just kind of, hey, it is what it is about a player getting hurt playing another sport. And this is relevant because we see from time to time these elite football prospects who also have their own interest in baseball and things like that. Alabama took Dylan Lonergan out of Brookwood. That's a baseball player. There's been some discussion about Deuce Robinson in Georgia, the remaining lone name from the class of 2023. He's kind of also got some baseball interest there too. There are some programs who are seemingly more willing to kind of embrace the two-sport type thing. But a place like Georgia and a league like the SEC, where football asks so much from you, to truly be the two-sport star and be able to be as good a football player as you need to be, I'm just not quite so sure how often that's going to work out. I would say it may never work out at a place like Georgia where the demands and the challenges are just so high. So interesting to see Eli Drinkwitz talking about some of that here this offseason. We will make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And as we wrap up here today, to go back to the thing that Georgia fans were enjoying from the weekend, Alabama losing in basketball, the number one seed going down, the SEC embarrassment in some respects because of some of the negative attention Alabama's gotten coming to an end. Georgia fans certainly having plenty of fun with this, including our buddy Mike the Mad Dog here as part of a golden shoe here today. I think this is really funny. He writes in to say, a familiar face was spotted among the San Diego State basketball fans, hashtag golden shoe. So you see some Aztec fans, they got their jerseys on, they're holding up their signs and things like that. And lo and behold, who do you see right there? Nick Saban, right there in the middle of the Aztec student section, holding up a sign that says Alabama's a football school. Very funny from Mad Dog and very well done indeed. We'll give him a golden shoe for that. These days, Florida's not a football school, a basketball school, or really any kind of school. Not much of a school, period. In 215 days from now, they get beat down again at the hands of the Georgia Bulldogs. That is our Gator Hater Countdown. We'll see you tomorrow at DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella, Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. R.S. Andrews shows up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. They'll take good care of you today. All right, we're going to try to take good care of you there as well with our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We'll take your comments here across all the platforms and just sort of find out what's on your mind here. In fact, we'll start on the YouTube side of things and then kind of move around from there. Paul Moon says, nice that Saban paid the basketball team to lose. Can't have another sport winning the national title when football doesn't. Yeah, I think that Nick Saban's probably pretty happy about that. Brad Newsom says Mark Richt was a great coach. Kirby Smart's an elite coach, and no doubt about that. The elite nature of Kirby Smart can't be questioned. Wildman Slayer asking a good question. Who's going to be the field goal kicker for Georgia this year? You get a couple of those guys on scholarship. Obviously, Jared Zirkle's still there, and I guess maybe Zirkle's the favorite. I think Peyton Woodard, not Woodyard. There's two guys that have very similar names. Peyton Woodard is the other guy that's in that competition. So we'll try to find out more about that as we head towards G-Day. Maybe we'll get a chance to see some of that with our own eyes there, too. Jonathan Aaron wondering if the Alabama basketball team lost because of an injured wide receiver. Also, didn't watch the game. How many golf balls and mustard bottles were on the court after the Tennessee loss? Yeah, so this Tennessee some of the highlights in this Tennessee basketball game were crazy. They tried to play a very physical brand against FAU, like to the point of like some dirty cheap shot type stuff. To me, the definition of irony is the fact that the Tennessee football team lost for being pillow soft, and the Tennessee basketball team lost while being probably a little tougher than they needed to be, a little too physical. It's almost like you could take some of that basketball physicality and give that to the football team. Football team might be in better shape. Lee Godown says he's got money on the new guy to become Georgia kicker. You could be right about that. You could be right about that. Jordan Bowman says, I think the Ole Miss was more relevant when Bo Wallace and Chad Kelly beat Ole Miss in back-to-back years. Yeah, I mean, you had a situation 2014, 2015 where Ole Miss was in the Sugar Bowl 2 years in a row. Foster Moss, I have not gotten an inside look at the championship rings. I keep waiting for Kirby to call me and ask me for my ring size. Thus far, he hasn't done that. I know he's been busy, but at a certain point in time, I'm assuming I'll probably get a call or a text from Kirby. He's going to probably want to know my ring size, and so maybe we'll talk more about that then. If he shares me a little bit of a preview of what they look like, I'll give them to you. But I'm sure Kirby's going to be reaching out here very soon to make sure, because you want to take care of the podcast. You know, players, coaches, administrators, I'm sure key donors, and then podcast hosts. I mean, when you think about like who really is in deserving of championship rings, I mean, I think we would all agree. Let's see what else. Frank Patterson also pointing out that the Shriners means Alabama would have beaten San Diego State if Mechie hadn't been hurt. That's very funny. DMart 42's got some traveling coming up. Appreciate that. Darius Smith Sr. laughing about that. Good to see you, Darius. Let's see what else. Yeah, Lee Go Downs. Maybe I'll share all of our ring sizes with Kirby for sure. Let's see what else. Let me go to Facebook just for a moment. Daniel Aldrich says it's going to be a long, hot summer for sure. Could certainly be. Matt Rukavina says I should just send him a DM. That's the best way to get in touch. Winfred Steinspring asked about those running backs during spring practice. There had been some online chatter about, maybe somebody was mentioning this a little earlier, Kendall being a little bit banged up or something like that. I don't know how much of a concern something like that should be right now, but obviously seeing this with our own eyes on G-Day is going to be pretty interesting, I would think, and, just kind of see who kind of brings that dynamic spark. Well, I think one of the biggest questions for Georgia, this offseason is that there is a certain type of player that Georgia always seems to have. The Sony Michel, James Cook, Kenny McIntosh style of can run the football but can also be a dynamic weapon in the passing game. Like, trying to figure out who that running back's going to be for Georgia I think is probably pretty important. Michael Norris says, which position group do you think is going to be the strongest in the upcoming year? Well, I mean, it's always easy to say, I guess, tight end because they got so many of them. I mean, I think if you give me, certainly if you'll let me have inside and outside, I mean, a linebacker's the thing you would say. And even if you split the two groups up into kind of like the edge position, the inside position, when you think about cable starters like Jamon Dumas-Johnson and Smile Mondon, the kind of incredible depth that the newcomers have, the Raylan Wilsons and the C.J. Allens and the Troy Bowles, that position may be about as good as you can get for Georgia. I think the outside linebacker for Georgia has a chance to be, way, way better too. Randy Hall says defensive line because of the depth. Could be the case there. I know that Trey Scott had expressed some confidence about that group. If you want to go back to some of the conversations that media types had with him back around the national championship, things like that, certainly Scott had shown a lot of confidence about that. So could be the answer there too. Lucy Bowers-Boykin and Barry Watkins talking about a new Braves uniform. I have not seen that. They're awesome. So Kaylee Manziel says they're awesome. It sounds like some people don't like them. I'd like to see those. Let's see what else. I better read something else. I forgot what it was. William Camacho talking about Gonzaga losing. This has been kind of a hot topic in our comment section. Yeah, the Zags have now gone down for sure. The Zags have gone down. So imagine my surprise. But yeah, they have gone down. DeMayer checking in. Good to see you, DeMayer. Ken Holcomb says tight end room is strong again. No doubt that's the case. Let's see what else. Barry Watkins says the softball team's doing very well this year. You love to hear that. Let me go to DawgNation.com for a minute. We're going to probably bounce out of here in probably about 10 minutes or so. So let's do about 10 more minutes. We'll pop out of here around 11:15 or so today. Senior Dog 54 says UGA commit Dwight Phillips ran a 10.26 100 meters at the Cobb County Championships. He would be on UGA's very good 4x100 team right now. Yeah, that's the thing about Phillips. This is one of the reasons why people like him so much is because he does have that blazing, as Senior Dog 54 points out, like really like track level speed. And to kind of put that at the running back position, to me, that's a really interesting wrinkle. Something the Georgia running back room I don't think is probably kind of had, really kind of going with that speed guy there at the running back spot. And Phillips is not just fast. He's like world-class track fast. You're right. Yeah, Scott Boland says we need a mnemonic or some other kind of memory trick to get the Woodyard woodering. Yeah, that's one of those deals where someone like me who has a little bit of an issue with names from time to time anyway, I can promise you I'm going to have some issues with that. David Scott Harris on the subject of the Ole Miss game, saying the Ole Miss game is the only good home game. I mean, I know Georgia won the game 48-7 a year ago, but I think there's a chance the South Carolina game's not bad. I think there's a chance that South Carolina game's not bad. David Scott Harris, by the way, going to be boarding Independence of the Seas a week from today. David, hope you have a great time. That's awesome. That's awesome. Let's see what else. Senior Dog 54 says taking up gardening. I have one tomato plant. If it's still alive come Easter, I might plant another one. There you go. There you go. I've never been much of a gardener. My wife and daughter like to do that together sometimes, though. Gary Westmiller checking in from Port St. Lucie, Florida. I wonder if Gary's a Mets fan. For a long time, the Mets called Port St. Lucie home. But, Gary, we're happy to have you here. Good conversation, as always. Back on YouTube here for a little bit. Paul Moon says Spencer Rattler gets on his nerves. Here's a response to the question about OU fans trying to take ownership of him if he's drafted. Yeah, so I kind of like that too. The Barstool guys asked Spencer Rattler, we talked about this in our SEC through the other day, about whether or not he wanted Oklahoma to claim him if he's a first-round quarterback. He said no. I like the honesty. I also like that as a little bit of a rebuke of the – it's like Jalen Hurts is constantly being asked to sort of reaffirm Alabama over and over again, and, Hurts sort of plays along with all of that. I guess Joe Burrow kind of does some of the same stuff with Ohio State too. I mean, the Ohio State thing with Joe Burrow is just unforgivable. I mean, the Hurts thing at Alabama, you can say that, Alabama benched him, but at the same time, Jalen Hurts was a good player for Alabama. Joe Burrow wasn't anything at Ohio State. And, Burrow kind of keeps being asked about the Ohio State thing because he plays in Cincinnati, and obviously a good number of Bengals fans are also Ohio State Buckeyes fans too. So he plays along. He never says a bad thing, but he probably sort of feels like he has to, and I'm sure Jalen Hurts just didn't want to stir up Alabama fans, so he sort of, claims both schools, and goodness knows Alabama's going to, whatever cheap pop they can get, hollow victory they can claim, they're going to do that, so they kind of claim Jalen Hurts is one of their own. Good for Spencer Rattler saying, no, Oklahoma doesn't get to claim me. Now, I think that Rattler's probably got a lot of work to do to actually be a first-round quarterback, but nonetheless, good to know that if he is one, he's all Gamecock and he's not claiming Oklahoma. I think that's good. Jay Shipe says, what weird thing do you do with any of your food? Examples would be no meat chili or no cheese on crystals. So what am I weird about food-wise? So I don't know if this counts or not, but I am very weird about anyone chewing loudly. I cannot stand that. So, I probably do a number of weird things, but like when I go to like a fast food restaurant, something like that, I try to position myself so I'm not sitting too close to anybody else because I don't want to hear them chewing. I just am like really obsessive about that. What else? I mean, I think the people around me would say I'm pretty weird about food, kind of across the board. I'm a very picky eater. So, a hard thing to answer, not because I have so little that's weird about me, because I have so much that's weird about me. I have a hard time singling it out. So Paul Moon brings up hot dogs. I'll give you an example. So years ago, I loved hot dogs. I eat hot dogs all the time. I could have eaten a hot dog every day. I loved hot dogs. And like a few years ago, just one day, boom, on a dime, I decided I'm never eating one of these again, and I haven't. I like, like brats and smoked sausage and things like that, but like actual hot dogs, just one day, boom, changed, never eaten one again. Never eat one again. Taylor Russell says, I have no problem eating fried gator. That's true. We had some fried gator at Marlowe's one time. It was good. It was good. Melissa Clark says, I hate people that smack and breathe loud. Yeah, that's always kind of tough. Let's see what else. All right, a few more here. Alan Hampton says, smacking lips while chewing and chewing with mouth wide open. Yeah, so I'll give you an idea of how, like, this is probably more information you want to know, but I'll give you an idea of how, like, insane I am about this, because generally speaking, I don't know anybody who's like, yeah, I love to hear people smacking their lips while they eat. I'll give you an idea of how, like, intense I go on this. It even gets to the point where oftentimes when it comes to, like, radio commercials, things like that are about food, I don't even like to hear people talk about food, because sometimes it reminds me of people smacking food. So whatever that thing is, we're like, I don't know if it's hypervigilance or what, but I just have a very weird aversion to a lot of noises. So yeah, I mean, listen, if you spend, like, I'm a nice guy and, pretty easy to get along with, but if you spent more than 15 or 20 minutes with me in kind of a sort of a private situation, you'd find out pretty quick. I'm pretty weird. I have a lot of peculiarities. That's just a fact. Back on Facebook for a moment. Let's see what else. Jacob O'Neill says, I like onions in things, not really on things. Yeah, I kind of get that. Keith Fold says, I am weird. Yeah, you listen. You don't even know the half of it, Keith. AJ Ferraro said, who made the hot dog that made BAC? Never again. I will never tell, because I, generally speaking, I'm not going to say too much. I will never tell, but it was a specific one that I was like, I'm never doing this ever again. Let's see what else. Barry Watkins says, I'm a Grey Poupon guy. No, I'm not fancy. Listen, that's one thing. Is like I don't dislike nice restaurants, give me a good steak, something like that, but I am not fancy. I am not a foodie. I am not into, like, so-and-so aioli this or, whatever, I don't even know, fancy stuff. Like, I am not into that. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Kaylee Mansell reminds me, because she and I are the same way about this. So, like, obviously, I mean, this is free advertising, but, pretty much everybody loves Chick-fil-A, right? I love Chick-fil-A too. But, like, the one thing I cannot stand is I have, like, one of the worst aversions to pickles. I'm repulsed by pickles, repulsed by them. And, when you get, and listen, no one's turning down free food, of course, but oftentimes a catered meal, especially for, like, our high school football games, which I'm grateful for. It's nice to have the crew taken care of. I want them well fed. But oftentimes the catered meal will be the Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches, which who wouldn't want that? Except for me, and I think Kaylee's kind of the same way. It's like Chick-fil-A puts the pickle on the sandwich. They think they're being nice. They think that's an extra touch. Hey, not only giving chicken sandwich, we're giving chicken sandwich a pickle on it. And I realized that the chicken sandwich is, like, totally, like, what do you call it? Marinated in pickle. I do realize that, but when you're crazy, you don't exactly follow logic. Like, I cannot stand the pickle on the Chick-fil-A sandwich. I cannot stand it. But I do like Chick-fil-A, just not the pickles. So when I go to a barbecue restaurant too, some places like put the pickle on top of the barbecue. So anytime I go to a barbecue restaurant the first time, I always ask them, do you put pickles in your barbecue? And they always look at me like I'm crazy, but that's the kind of thing I want to avoid if all possible. Let's see what else. Dara Smith Sr. also agreeing with that there as well. So there you go. I feel like I'm in good company. All right, final comments. We got to get ready to go, y'all. We got a busy day around here. Morris Rich also noticing how weird. I'm telling you, you spend time with me, you realize, like, being married to me is a real chore, a real chore, because I have lots of peculiarities. Working with me, very big chore, lots of weirdness. Senior Dog 54 says that, hot dogs have been known to kind of contribute to some medical issues, and that is true, I think. But there's also plenty of other, I guess, what you call processed meats, like sausage and bacon and things like that can do the same thing. I haven't slowed down on that stuff at all. If anything, I've increased. So while it is true that maybe hot dogs have the potential for medical complication, other stuff like bacon and sausage, which is kind of the same potential thing, I haven't slowed down on that stuff at all. Brer Double Dog talking about dad taking to the varsity for chili dogs. Yeah, listen. So, I've got great memories of my family going to the varsity there as well. But the move for me now at the varsity is, and since I don't do chili dogs, is to put the chili on like a double cheeseburger. So you get the double cheeseburger, or they call it, I guess, double steak. You get that and put the chili on it. And if they'll do it right, they'll put the chili on the top side and the bottom side. And so I like varsity chili a lot. And I just put it on a burger now as opposed to the dog. Let's see what else. Morris Rich says no hot dog even in Sanford Stadium. See, Morris, that used to be my thing. Is I used to eat hot dog every stadium I go to. I used to do a lot of stuff with the Braves, things like that, and so I'd be eating ballpark hot dogs every day. And just one day, it just changed, and when it changed, it changed. All right, final ones. Let's see what else. Fred got on the subject of slaw on a burger. I know a lot of the old time folks like the slaw on the burger. I like chili on my burger, but not slaw. I don't like slaw, period. Paul Moon went to a Brazilian steakhouse yesterday. That's one of those places where you hold up the sign, they just keep bringing you the meat. Let's see what else. Anybody got a football thing they want to do before we leave? Or getting ready to go for today? Bill Sanders says I eat with my pinky in the air. I'm telling you right now, I'm not fancy at all. I'm not into like fancy frou-frou hipster stuff. I'm just not into that. Now, if you want to go back 20 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, was I, I don't know that I was ever hipster. I might have been like hipster adjacent for a little while. I'm just telling you right now, I am not into any of that at all. I'm not into any of that whatsoever. I don't take a picture of my food. I don't, I don't have any opinion. Like, I'm just not into any of that. Like I said, I like nice food. I like to eat a good steak. I like to, occasionally I might eat a meal that's semi-expensive. Of course, it seems like everything's expensive these days. But I am not into like that hipster foodie scene. I'm just telling you right now, I'm allergic to that. I am allergic to that. James Crump says Georgia's going to three-peat. Unpopular fact. Georgia fans are already pretty tough to deal with, but if James ends up being right about that, oh boy, Georgia fans are going to be a mess on the heels of 3 straight championships. Daniel Aldrich's kind of weighing in on that too. All right, last stuff, and we're going to go. Anything else before we go? All right, good stuff. Thanks for being here. Appreciate that. We're going to wrap up for today. Hey, y'all have a good day. We'll come back tomorrow. Fun, busy show. We have some good stuff, I think, planned for this week. Some of it I kind of want to do today, but time-wise just wasn't able to get done. Kind of already looking at a Tuesday, Wednesday. I think we've got some good stuff in store, so we'll do that for you then. And if you just joined us here late for the cool down, go back and check out the Today Show. That was really good there as well. So have a great day. Big thanks to our friends at R.S. Andrews making it possible. R.S. Andrews is one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price is promised. They got that air conditioning unit tuned back up for you. It's warm. Even with the rain, it's still pretty warm. So that means your air conditioning unit's probably working right now, so make sure yours is working the way it's supposed to. Get it tuned back up. If it's not, factory fresh specs, what RS Andrews can do for you, and it only costs you $99. Find them online at rsandrews.com. Also, Braves do have some new uniforms. You read more about this at ajc.com. I guess they got a story about this. In fact, I am clicking into the story right now. Let's see if I can see the. Oh, these are nice. Yeah, those are pretty cool. Oh, it's got for the A for Atlanta, it's got the. Those are kind of cool. I like those. I think that's probably pretty cool. I'm imagining they'll probably sell those pretty well. So you can read more about this ajc.com. You want to see some pictures of that. All right, y'all have a good day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We will look forward to talking to you then.